Can you people up?
Yes.
Pressure, yeah, that's probably the best word to describe Dustin Poirier's career. He started climbing the ranks back when fights were held in dirty basements, and nobody took decision victories seriously. He lost many important fights in his career, and it's interesting that he glow up only after having almost 20 fights in the UFC. So let's remember the rocky path that led the Louisiana guy to the top. If they gave out championship belts for winning street fights, Dustin would have had one by age of 10. He grew up without a father in the pretty rough town of Lafayette and was always too active to sit still. He did wrestling, but neither that nor any other sports gave him real passion. The real thrill for Poirier was in the fights. He fought on the streets almost every day, and it eventually landed Dustin in a juvenile detention center.
Started running with the wrong guys, hanging around with the wrong people, doing the wrong things, had no business doing, shouldn't have been doing. I just didn't have anywhere that I was trying to focus my time and myself into being something, or I just running around aimlessly pretty much. And, that got me into juvenile detention and court-ordered programs, boot camps.
He spent about a year there and didn't even finish high school, struggling for money. Poirier got a job at McDonald's, but combined it with partying and hanging out on the streets, his life changed drastically at 18. When young Dustin started boxing and training every day, he then discovered MMA, and it filled a gap he didn't know he had.
I've always been a fighter my whole life, and when I found mixed martial arts, it changed my life. It changed my life around. It gave me something to be the best at, something to, it gave me goals.
He became obsessed with fights, thinking about them all day and night. When he started working, he lost weight, parted ways with bad company, and made his MMA debut within 6 months. He and his girlfriend shared a car, and Jolie drove him to training sessions and tournaments in other states. She'd race back to Louisiana before dawn to make it to work, and then pick him up after the fights. A month before turning 19, Poirier had his first amateur fight. For a year, he traveled the country winning fight after fight. In May 2009, he made his professional debut. In less than a minute and a half, Poirier knocked out his opponent and began his journey to the top of the world rankings. In the following 11 months, Dustin had 5 more fights, winning them all early and never even waiting for the start of the 3rd round. Among his opponents were those with a 3-0 record and an experienced fighter with 9 wins and 2 losses. Both had already appeared on Fight Matrix, so beating them immediately boosted his rating. He found himself at the 261st spot with UFC champion BJ Penn, who had achieved a record 3 title defenses. Behind him were Shinya Aoki, Gilbert Melendez, Eddie Alvarez, and in 8th place, Frankie Edgar, who soon took the belt from Penn. Having proved himself in local tournaments, Poirier caught the attention of major promoters. WEC took notice of him, and Dustin first went to Canada to face a local prospect with a 6-1 record and ranked 250th, but Poirier brutally defeated him in just 57 seconds. In his next fight, he competed in the WEC against 30-year-old fighter Danny Castillo. Dustin spent a lot of time on his back trying to apply submissions, but Danny Castillo repeatedly escaped dangerous situations and won by judges' decision.
Castillo!
Another loss could have ended his WEC career, but he had to fight again in 3 months against an opponent with 11 wins and 2 losses. Dustin knew that if he lost, he would return to Louisiana and struggle in local promotions, waiting for another chance to perform on the big stage. Thanks to incredible motivation, Poirier initiated a fierce fight from the very first seconds, repeatedly took his opponent down, and finished everything with a knockout in less than a minute.
Dustin wasn't lying.
The victory allowed him to keep his UFC contract, as his division was entirely under the control of the world's strongest league. The guy would probably have had to fight his way up for a long time if it weren't for a series of circumstances.
Found out the news that the UFC and WC were merging, and a couple weeks after that, my last WC fight, I got a phone call to fill in for Jose Aldo as a last-minute replacement in a weight class that I never fought at, and I was ready, for that opportunity.
At UFC 125, Jose Aldo was supposed to defend his belt for the first time against Josh Grisby. The Brazilian withdrew due to injury, and matchmakers decided not to remove the fight from the card and put Poirier in as a replacement. Of course, the fight wasn't a title bout for him, but it was a chance to prove himself. Josh Grisby went on a 10-win streak and won all his fights in the UFC. He was in the top 10 of the world rankings and was rightfully considered one of the best featherweights on the planet. Dustin had just over a month to prepare, and he had to cut weight down to 145 pounds. He managed to do it and pulled off an upset by beating his opponent in the clinch and grappling for most of the fight.
My goodness!
The judges unanimously awarded the victory to Poirier, immediately propelling him into the top 20 of the world rankings. Poirier ranked 16th in the featherweight division with Jose Aldo ahead of him, followed by a group of fighters like Hiroyuki Takaya, Chad Mendes, Mavel Gamboa.
A lot of people expected me to start trying to get a title shot right after a couple wins, especially after beating the #1 contender and then getting a couple more in a row. But, I'm 23 years old and I want to be in the sport for the long run. I want to have a long career. And, when I get in there and fight for that belt, I want to be ready, 100%, no looking back, no regrets. And I think that takes time and growth.
The young and daring Dustin from Louisiana got a chance to fight veteran Honey Yahya, but Honey withdrew due to injury. Dustin had to fight newcomer Jason Young. From the very first minutes, he confidently engaged in striking exchanges, constantly attacking.
Oh, nice combo by Poirier.
When needed, he worked in the clinch or took the fight to the ground.
Poirier takes him down.
He lost the initiative in the third round, but it didn't stop him from securing his second consecutive UFC victory.
The Diamond Poirier.
After this win, within a year, Dustin easily dealt with two more fighters. First, he choked out Pablo Garza with a darts choke, a fighter now only remembered by longtime fans.
Darts choke. Trying to lock it up right there. It looks like he's got it. Nice. Garza's
Can he finish it?
Deep choke.
Dustin Poirier, winner.
Next, he faced a very young Hawaiian kid named Max Holloway. Holloway stepped in on short notice a month before the fight and became the youngest fighter on the UFC roster. Poirier showed him no mercy. After some distance work, he executed a takedown and finished the fight with an armbar submission from a triangle choke.
He's going to break his arm.
It is all over.
That's brilliant.
Dustin.
A few hours after the fight, Poirier received his first post-fight bonus. Despite a 4-win streak, Dustin's ranking barely improved. However, his success did not go unnoticed. A few months later, Poirier headlined an event, facing off against the Korean Zombie. The Asian fighter had already made a name for himself in the UFC, delivering 2 phenomenal finishes, performing the first twister in the organization's history, and tying the record for the fastest knockout by sending Mark Hominick to the canvas in just 7 seconds.
And it is all over.
The fight between the two young stars fully lived up to expectations. In the first round, Zombie scored a takedown, and at the beginning of the second round, he unleashed a variety of strikes on Poirier, attempting submissions on the ground. Dustin responded and tried to change the situation, but to no avail. In the fourth round, when both fighters were already tired, Zombie landed a beautiful combination, cornered Dustin, and within a few seconds locked a choke on his neck. Some publications considered this fight to be the fight of the year, but for Poirier, it was his second defeat. He dropped to the 26th spot in the rankings, which made him reevaluate his prospects. Dustin decided to change the scenery and move to Florida to train at American Top Team, one of the most respected gyms in the world. He was taken under the wing of Mike Brown, who at the time had not yet formally retired. Thanks to the experience and knowledge gained from Mike, Poirier managed to climb back into the rankings at the 9th spot. 7 months after the painful loss to Zombie, Poirier faced off against the Ultimate Fighter winner and immediately applied the same choking technique he had recently been submitted by.
The Darce choke works again.
I think I'm coming into my own in the UFC. I feel comfortable here. I feel like I belong here. When I'm in the locker room warming up, when I walk to the cage, when I step in there, I feel like it's mine. I'm here for a reason.
Shortly after this, the first UFC rankings were published, and Poirier took the 7th position right behind Cub Swanson. At the time, the featherweight belt was still around the waist of Jose Aldo, and the main contenders for his title were Chad Mendes, Ricardo Llamas, and the Korean Zombie. Poirier continued to work on himself and improve his skills, aiming for the top of the UFC's featherweight division, eager to get back on a winning streak as soon as possible. Poirier accepted a short-notice fight against Cub Swanson. With less than a month to prepare, he weighed around 82 kilograms. To avoid raising any suspicions with the matchmaker, Dustin lied a little about his weight and began intense training. It was the toughest and most grueling camp of his career, but the work was done. Swanson was on a 3-fight knockout streak, but Dustin managed to give him a competitive fight. He kept a good pace, controlled the distance, and executed several takedowns.
Tried to go for a head and arm throw, but now landing some very good shots and combinations is Poirier. Yeah,
but Swanson took the rounds due to his powerful bursts and heavier strikes. In the final 5 minutes, Swanson smothered his opponent on the ground. After that fight, Dustin returned to Louisiana, unsure of what to do next. His girlfriend came to the rescue, dropping out of medical school to move with him to Florida. With her support, Poirier fully dedicated himself to training and secured 3 consecutive victories. First, he defeated the 10th-ranked Eric Koch.
Forward. Oh, right hand, bitch!
Followed by a knockout of TUF winner Diego Brando.
Hook on the right leg. Some more shots. This could be it. That's it.
Dustin, the Diamond Poirier, finishes Diego Brando.
And finally, he took care of Akira Kurosani, who was undefeated in the UFC. This winning streak propelled Dustin to the 5th spot in the rankings.
Poirier, another finish.
Poirier wanted a rematch with Swanson, but instead he got a fight against the brash Irishman named Conor McGregor. At that time, the Notorious was just ramping up his brilliant career, but had already thrown a dozen challenges and angered half the roster with his behavior. It was evident at the weigh-ins that Poirier was too wound up and approached the fight overly emotional, for which he paid the price. In the first round, Conor claimed victory.
Looking to finish the fight.
That's it.
It's
It's over.
all over.
Dustin, who had never lost by knockout before, faced another turning point in his career. Poirier took a short break and announced that he was leaving the featherweight division for good and aimed to become the champion at 155 pounds, 70 kilograms. At the time, this statement was met with skepticism, but in his next fight, Dustin annihilated the tough Diego Ferreira.
Poirier is sharp with those hands tonight.
That's going to be it.
But hey, he might be out. There it is. Dustin.
Then he faced Yancy Medeiros, dropped him within half a minute, and delivered body shots a few minutes later.
He's rocked. Oh, down goes Medeiros.
The event took place in Louisiana, Poirier's home state, and the victory was met with thunderous applause from the stands.
From this one, the striking of cuts, hooks.
That's it.
Poirier pouring it on. That'll do it. Dustin.
With these wins, Poirier ranked 15th in the lightweight division. Ahead of him were Nate Diaz, Darius, and champion Rafael dos Anjos. His main competitors were Anthony Pettis, Donald Cerrone on an 8-fight winning streak, and Khabib Nurmagomedov, who was dealing with injuries. Within a few months, Dustin moved up to the 13th spot and was paired against rising star Joe Duffy. The Irishman had already won 2 UFC fights, both in the first round. Duffy had previously defeated Conor McGregor, and many were anticipating his further rise, so the rematch was inevitable. if Joe would rise through the rankings. Poirier and Duffy headlined an event in Ireland, but Duffy withdrew due to a concussion 3 days before the event. The matchmakers decided not to look for a replacement and rescheduled the fight for early the following year. They met at UFC 195, and surprisingly, the fight was moved to the preliminary card. Broadcasted exclusively on Fight Pass, the UFC wanted as many Irish fans as possible to watch the fight at a convenient time. After the event, a delighted Dana White announced that the fight with Duffy had broken the viewing record. Duffy started off well and even broke Poirier's nose, but Dustin quickly regained the initiative, engaged in grappling, and secured a confident decision victory.
I'm saying disappointment they didn't fight in that one, yes.
The win moved Poirier up to the 12th spot, but he had to spend a month and a half recovering from a broken nose. His next fight was announced in March against the 11th-ranked Bobby Green, who hadn't fought in 17 months, and after a series of injuries could hardly be considered a genuine top 10 contender. Poirier controlled the fight and scored 2 knockdowns in the middle of the first round.
And that's a mistake.
This victory propelled Poirier into the top 10 of the lightweight division for the first time.
That is a big, big win for Dustin Poirier, especially.
He was ranked 8th, riding a 4-fight winning streak and eager to continue. In September, Dustin faced Michael Johnson. It wasn't the most advantageous fight for him. Firstly, Johnson had suffered 2 consecutive losses and dropped to the 10th spot. Secondly, he still possessed the fastest hands in the division and excellent boxing skills.
Fast start tonight, Dustin Poirier.
Poirier engaged in a striking exchange, and one of them proved to be unsuccessful. A beautiful knockout put Johnson back in the top rankings. However, Dustin didn't fall out of the top 10. Dariush surpassed him, but the division was in for significant changes. Eddie Alvarez was preparing to hand over his belt to the mischievous Irish hands of Conor McGregor. Khabib Nurmagomedov and Tony Ferguson couldn't seem to fight each other and were waiting for the next announcement. Nate Diaz, with his popularity after the McGregor rematch, wasn't planning to fight anytime soon. As a result, the lightweight division was full of potential matchups, but with several key fighters preoccupied with other matters, the division's landscape remained uncertain. In this context, Poirier continued to push forward, looking for opportunities to climb the ranks and establish himself as a top contender. At the end of 2016, the UFC announced a fight between Poirier and Jim Miller, a veteran who had been written off several times, but managed to put together a 3-fight winning streak. Poirier controlled the fight, but Miller's leg kicks took their toll, causing Dustin to barely stand on his feet. After the 15-minute war, all 3 judges scored the fight differently, with one even scoring it a draw. The other 2 sided with Poirier. Dustin said that he had many fights, but never felt more pain than in that fight against Miller, when he repeatedly attacked my leg. My shin was in excruciating pain. Between rounds, I tried to listen to my corner, but all I could think about was the pain, Dustin Poirier recalled. Despite numerous minor injuries, Poirier returned to action just 3 months later and faced former champion Eddie Alvarez. The Diamond immediately took control of the fight, maintaining distance, attacking Alvarez's body and legs. Midway through the second round, Alvarez was stunned multiple times, but survived and went on the offensive.
Dustin took him again hard with that left hand.
He got carried away and delivered several illegal knee strikes to his opponent's head. The referee stopped the fight, and after a few minutes, the bout was ruled a no contest.
No contest.
A rematch was scheduled, but had to wait for over a year. In the meantime, Dustin managed to defeat 2 stars. First, there was a bloody fight with Anthony Pettis, which featured multiple reversals and position changes.
Significant strikes landed. Nice combination there.
When Poirier locked a body triangle on Pettis, forcing him to submit due to a rib injury.
Impressive. What happened? That's the end of the fight. Showtime. Pettis did tap, so Dustin Poirier.
Next up was Justin Gaethje, with the fighters ranking 6th and 7th at the time. They headlined a UFC on Fox event in Arizona, delivering a chaotic slugfest, trading blows at every opportunity. In total, they landed nearly 300 strikes on each other. This battle eventually became the fight of the year, according to several major publications.
The last thing you want to do, you got to hope that the damage accumulates on him. Threw a hook and landed his own hook. Important.
Poirier won the fight with a punch from the clinch in the 4th round.
Oh, the clinch!
Dustin Poirier, goodness! Knockout!
However, he strained his quadriceps. Having recovered, Poirier met Alvarez again, and this time he left no room for accidents, winning by technical knockout at the end of the 2nd round.
What a warrior, Eddie Alvarez. Dustin Poirier finishes the fight.
Dustin Poirier! Dustin the Diamond!
3 consecutive impressive victories finally propelled the Diamond to the 3rd spot in the rankings. Only Khabib and Conor were ahead of him. After a fight with Diaz was canceled due to a thigh injury, Dustin focused on high-profile fights and almost immediately got Max Holloway as an opponent. At that time, Khabib was serving a suspension for his infamous eagle jump, and Conor McGregor had disappeared from the radar after a painful defeat. Because of this situation, it was decided to introduce an interim lightweight title, which Tony Ferguson and Max Holloway were supposed to fight for. However, Ferguson declined and the fight was offered to Poirier. Dustin seized this chance and delivered another super fight. In the fight with Holloway, there was almost no grappling, but each of the 5 rounds had a high pace, amazing exchanges, feints, and bold attacks.
Again.
Busy guy.
In the end, the judges awarded Max only one 5-minute round, and Poirier became the happy owner of the interim UFC lightweight title.
Champion of the world, Dustin the Diamond Poirier!
However, the title unification bout was not as spectacular as fans would have liked. Dustin managed to land a solid shot on Khabib once.
Khabib now on the retreat.
But the Dagestani fighter was unstoppable that night. He managed to take down and submit Poirier. After such a painful defeat, Dustin took a break and returned immediately to a fight of the year contender against Dan Hooker, who was climbing the rankings at that time. This fight amazed everyone, as there was no audience in the arena. Every single strike sounded like a gunshot.
Poirier can't fire his left hand, and there it is. Watch the clinch here.
In a very brutal and competitive fight, veteran Poirier managed to secure the victory. After the sudden announcement of a rematch against Conor McGregor, many thought it would be an easy win for Conor, as he had already defeated Poirier in just 1 round. The rematch headlined the numbered UFC 257 event on Fight Island. The Irishman was the favorite and started the fight actively, landing several good shots and rocking Poirier. However, McGregor unexpectedly experienced issues. He slowed down, and in the 2nd round, Conor crumbled. Dustin knocked him down and then finished him on the ground, avenging his past defeat. After Khabib's retirement, Poirier was the first contender for the title, but he chose another fight against McGregor. The trilogy was set to conclude on July 11th, with a victory bringing Dustin not only fabulous fees. The bout ended in the 1st round, during which Dustin dominated. However, surprisingly, the fight ended with a leg break for Conor. Despite the strange ending, Poirier finally got a title fight against Charles Oliveira, where he dominated the 1st round and tried to finish him multiple times.
Dustin hurt him quick.
However, this exhausted him, leading to a submission finish. Charles managed to survive the beating and defeated Dustin. Many thought this would be the end of Poirier's career. Nevertheless, after taking a break, he returned to the octagon against the incredibly entertaining Michael Chandler. As you can imagine, the fight was extremely entertaining. The fighters rocked each other and scored knockdowns. However, Chandler, true to his style, tired out, which Dustin capitalized on and finished him. After that, he announced that his title race was not over yet. His title race took a very unexpected turn, even surprising Poirier himself. While Islam Makhachev was battling Alexander Volkanovski, the top contenders were waiting for their chance to challenge for the championship. So, the UFC leadership reinstated the BMF Baddest Mother Lover title. This belt is contested only by the bravest and most entertaining fighters, a scenario that happened only once when Nate Diaz faced Jorge Masvidal. For the first time since 2019, the BMF title was up for grabs with Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje as ideal candidates for this honor. Since their first meeting, both had undergone significant changes, following a similar path of victories and losses against the same opponents. However, they did so in equally spectacular fashion, leading to the much-anticipated rematch between the most ruthless and bloodthirsty lightweights. Before the fight, the odds were even making it challenging to identify advantages, and the first round unfolded accordingly. Poirier had more successful moments in the first half.
Shot, one of a possible five.
He got stunned. Here with a big moment.
While Justin Gaethje finished the round strong. However, it felt like a warm-up before the real showdown, and this fight was full of surprises. Suddenly, Gaethje, who had never thrown high kicks, unleashed a kick that no one in the arena, including Poirier, expected.
It's being heard from now, about a minute gone by round two. Justin Gaethje head kicks Dustin Poirier into the stratosphere.
Dustin Poirier suffered a knockout defeat in the second round, his first in a long time. However, knowing Poirier, he wasn't about to give up or doubt himself. So he decided to face the biggest prospect in the lightweight division, Benoit Saint Denis, the brutal and powerful Frenchman. Former Special Forces aimed to break everyone on his way to UFC championship. Before the upcoming fight, Dustin talked about how the knockout loss to Justin had a profound effect on him emotionally.
Yeah, and you know, I'm no stranger to coming off of losses, but this one at 35 years old, after getting title shots and working my way up, getting another title shot, when you lose like that to a guy like Gaethje, and at this age, it really felt like, you know, all losses suck, but this one really hurt, you know, because I don't know how many more runs, how many more chances I have left. That's why I kind of embraced this whole fight week. Even in the tunnel before I walked out, this training camp, like I was just more grateful for everything, because I really mean it. Like every time I do this could be the last time, and I just want to enjoy those feelings and those emotions. I was telling my wife before the fight, on fight day, like what a life, how grateful am I to be able to experience these emotions. Like even through fight week, through the interviews and stuff, I was like, you know what, I'm getting to experience this. I'm grateful for it. I feel good. It's just like, it's tough to put into words the emotions of fight week and the stress and the pressure of being under that magnifying glass of a fight like this, especially coming off of a loss. But I tried to put myself in a mind frame where I was just looking at things like an experience, instead of I have to do this interview, I have to do this workout, I was looking at it like from a third person, like outside of myself, like I get to experience these things.
He was in the deepest depression he had ever experienced in his life. Poirier began to realize that the end of his fighting career was nearing, and with such a defeat, he might never reach a title fight, which is why he decided to accept the challenge from the young Frenchman at UFC 299. Saint Denis was a big favorite despite Poirier's experience. Many believed that Benoit would simply dominate Dustin on the ground, similar to what happened to him in fights against Khabib and Oliveira. However, many underestimated Dustin's motivation. He entered the fight as determined as he did in his youth when he was bald, making it clear to everyone that this was his new beginning. But the fight didn't start well for Poirier. The fight's pattern played out as experts predicted. The Frenchman pressed Dustin against the cage and constantly took him to the ground. Adding fuel to the fire was Dustin's desire to constantly go for the guillotine whenever Benoit attempted takedowns. Poirier's intentions were understandable. Catching the Frenchman in a guillotine was his sacred mission. However, Due to constant attempts to catch his opponent in a chokehold, he found himself in an unfavorable position. As strange as it may sound, this peculiar tactic began to bear fruit in the second round. Benoit noticeably tired and began to hesitate when attempting takedowns, which made him less confident in his movements. This allowed the veteran to seize the moment and brutally finish him as in the good old days. It might seem that this could conclude a beautiful story of Dustin Poirier's eventful career. However, events became even more intriguing. Dustin's former opponents, who were ranked higher, fought on the next UFC 300 tournament. Max Holloway moved up in weight to face Justin Gaethje for the BMF title, while Charles Oliveira, having lost the championship to Khabib Nurmagomedov's friend Islam Makhachev, attempted to regain his position in the title race. However, both Charles and Justin lost, opening the path for Dustin. Now, the veteran, whom everyone had counted out, will try for the third time to become the world champion in lightweight. Against him stands a young and even more dangerous opponent than Khabib, Islam Makhachev, who carries the legacy of older friend. Based on this video, did you notice how every time people count Poirier out, the diamond shines even brighter? Do you think Dustin Poirier will still be able to become champion in the upcoming fight against Islam Makhachev?